Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Today in this lecture we'll talk about two very important writing styles. First of all, descriptive, and second, I would say most important, persuasive writing. Let's start from descriptive writing. Descriptive writing is what? It's an act or art of writing to describe. Writers, they often try to describe people, places, things, sights and sounds, tastes, smells, fragrances, and everything, they can capture in their words. Frankly speaking, these descriptive writers, they are like painters. The way painters, they play with numerous colors and they disperse colors on their vast canvases to create images and paint pictures, for the viewers. Exactly the same way descriptive writers, they play with their words. Not ordinary words, dear students. Here, when I say they play with words, it means they are playing with highly colorful, special adjectives, adverbs, very much powerful verbs and nouns, to render descriptions to the object of descriptions in such a way that, readers, they feel as if they are also part of writers', experience. Whatever writer, saw, readers feel as if, they are also seeing it, with their own eyes. Writer touched it, smelled it, heard it. Readers feel as if, they were also very much sitting or standing with the, with the writer and experiencing the same beauty. In other words, descriptive writers do not tell, their readers that flower is beautiful. What they do is actually they show their readers actually that, look, flower is beautiful. They don't tell, they show actually. For example, let's say I offer you an apple and I ask you, take a bite of it, and then if I ask that, okay, fine, now write a line, give me a sentence now, what you did and how it tasted. A person who is not a descriptive writer, what he's going to say, he will simply write a sentence which will be more of, I would say, very primary details, with very elementary, with very ordinary, picture words. For example, he bit into the apple and it tasted good. Now, it's just a fact. You bit into the apple and the taste of the apple was good. Now, if the same experience, I offer to a descriptive writer, and then if I ask him, now, put your experience into words, his sentence is going to be totally different. He's not going to use any ordinary word. He's not going to use any lifeless expression. His line is not going to be sort of only fact or the figure. Rather, he is going to use extremely colorful, adjectives, adverbs, and strong verbs. And he's going to offer as if it was not he, rather his reader, bit into. Take a look of it, and if I read it for you, the same line which you said, or which you wrote was, he bit into the apple and it tasted good. But a descriptive writer is going to change this line into altogether different. Like the line goes, he slowly closed his teeth on the ripe, succulent, ruby-colored apple. Look at the choice of words. He slowly closed his teeth on the ripe, succulent, ruby-colored apple. The crunch of his teeth, just imagine, as if not he actually, it is happening to me. The crunch of his teeth piercing the apple's skin was deafening, and the sweet juices of the apple ran down his chin. The taste of the meat was as sweet as candy, and he felt euphoric. Dear students, important thing, perhaps I mentioned sometime when I was talking about, the yardstick, when we were discussing about a good message, and there, we said, well, a message should have 5, 6 important components. The same journalistic WH, if you remember, that a good message is the one which at least contains all these WH. But in descriptive writing, WH is not. In narrative writing, WH again can be important, but in descriptive writing, yardstick is totally different. In descriptive writing, who, what, when, where, why, and how, these things are of secondary importance actually. What's primary importance? Primary importance is 5 senses. I mean, good description is the one which can very successfully appeal to your sense of sight, sense of smell, sense of taste, sense of hearing, sense of touch. These 5 senses which human beings have, descriptive writing is measured, is tested, is assessed and evaluated onto this yardstick. Some descriptive writings, they are so particular that when they finish their writing, now they start counting in this small description how many senses I have talked about. If you come back to the same message, and if I ask you, count how many senses are present in this message, probably 2, 3, 4 you can count. For example, he slowly closed his teeth on the ripe, succulent, ruby-colored apple. Now look here, it's more of visual actually. Color, ruby-colored, succulent, full of juice, and the crunch of his teeth. Now here, sense of what? Hearing. The sound he is talking about, the crunch of his teeth, piercing the apple's skin was deafening, and the sweet juices of the apple. Now sweet is sense of taste. So sense of seeing, sense of hearing, and sense of taste, by using the word sweet. Ran down his chin, the taste of the meat was as sweet as candy, and he felt euphoric. So 3 senses we were able to see in this descriptive writing. So keep in mind, descriptive writers, they do not analyze their messages by checking how many different WH aspects they have covered. Rather, they analyze their messages in the end, that how many senses are present in their message. Why? Because they want to paint pictures for the readers. They want to lend their experiences actually to their readers. They want to take their readers by holding their arm to that very moment where only writer was present. But through writer's descriptive abilities, they are able to lend that very experience and make it possible for the readers to see, to hear, to smell, to touch that very thing. This is an art. It's not an easy thing. I personally like descriptive writing. I give always more importance to it. Whenever I go to libraries, very much unconsciously, I feel myself standing at that section of books, where my favorite, descriptive writers, their books are, and my hands, uncontrollably, frankly speaking, always move towards, and I always enjoy, spending time over a cup of coffee or tea, with these descriptive writings, because it is, in the real sense of the word, through your books, traveling from one place to another. You can travel into future, you can travel into past, through, the pages of your books. Now, this descriptive writing, we can, of course, use in our essays, we can use, in stories, poems, and reports, of course. Now, let's see what are the characteristics of, good descriptive writing. There are 4 important characters for descriptive writing. Number 1, I have already mentioned it before, good descriptive writing includes many vivid sensory details. Sensory details means, 5 senses. As I told you before, that yardstick for descriptive writing is not WH. Yardstick for descriptive writing is actually 5 senses. which are 5 basic channels of information. Number 2, good descriptive writing often makes use of figurative language. Writers, not always, like in technical writing, for example, in report writing especially, we try to resort to only such words which can easily be understood by readers with literal meanings, or you can say with the literal use. Literal use means, the primary, dictionary meanings of such words like, and short and familiar, blah, 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 all the rules, which we... But in descriptive writing, we, or writers, they always like, try they lavishly, with figurative, like analogies they use, similes, they use metaphors, like in the previous writing, as sweet as candy is a simile, like, writer used. So lavishly, like, writers resort to figurative language, and this is how they make their writings beautiful. Third point or characteristic of descriptive writing is that good descriptive writing uses precise language. I mentioned before that descriptive writers do not resort to ordinary adjectives or adverbs or verbs or nouns. Rather, they bring in colorful adjectives and adverbs. Such adjectives and adverbs, which could help their writers paint pictures for the readers, and very much powerful verbs. Not very broadly, describing action, rather very, very specific such verbs which could, like, give writers very specific understanding of the actions, such verbs they use. And same is true to nouns also. The last one is good descriptive writing is organized. Like every writing has its organization. Descriptive writing can have spatial organization, means, when you are describing spaces, for example. Descriptive writing can make use of order of importance, for example, what's most important and least important. They can also, like, make use of chronological organization, where things which happen first and second and third and onwards, this is how they can always plan and organize their writings. So these are 4 characteristics. Let's go ahead and see what are the do's and don'ts of description. The very first part and parcel of description is the dominant impression. Look here, if you want to describe a person or place or thing, there should be one dominant impression. I mean, you want to describe the good aspect or the bad aspect. Or if you want to describe the both, which one is the dominant? You want to describe your friend, you want to talk about how friendly he was, or how cold he was. You can describe the both, but one has to be dominant. His, let's say, cold aspect of your friend, for example, that is dominating. That enjoys the primary, focus of your writing. And somewhere, like, in 1 or 2 sentences, you can talk about his, friendly nature also. But there has to be a dominant. Description is never made on, in other words, to put it differently, I mean, description in which half positive and half negative, that's, I would say, a poor description. Dominant impression has to be there. Number 2, show, do not tell. Through example also, if you tell people, it means you are not describing, you are perhaps narrating, or you are perhaps writing expositional stuff. But descriptive writing is all about showing. Like an example is there for you. You can see the difference in showing and telling. If you want to talk about, let's say, your room, let's say your drawing room or your study or your bedroom, there is one very plain description. You can talk about, like, the color of your room and how the setting of your room, for example, the size of your room. But it's descriptive nature, describing your room in such a way that reader could feel as if, like, he's very much sitting inside that room. Let's take a look. The first sentence is, it was a nice room, a warm room, it was a happy place to be. A nice room, a warm room, and a happy place to be. Now, nice, how much nice room? Nice is such a word, I mean, my nice and your nice can be different, and it's warm room. Was it hot room, for example? It was a happy place to be. How much happy? See, it's more of, like, kind of factual writing, less of descriptive writing. If the same factual sentence I would like to change into descriptive one, it should go this way. Sunlight pours through the window, pooling on the down comforter which lies across the bed. A block of light also angles across the wall opposite the bed, highlighting the pale orange color of the room. A thick red carpet sprawls over the floor, a corner of it lit too by a sunbeam. The room's windows admit the sun along two walls, and tiny dust motes hover in the bright streaks which glaze the room. Now, from this description, readers can, in the real sense, understand that what writer meant by nice, what writer meant by warm, and what writer meant by happy place, to be. The third important, do's and don'ts is observation. For description, writers need eyes. I mean, everybody's got eyes, but descriptive writers, they have got perhaps some special eyes. If you ask me the source of information, your source of information or my source of information can be, let's say, library, can be internet, can be this, can be that, but a descriptive writer's source of information is this world. He is the one who keeps his eyes open, and he keeps this thing as mass storage. So when he sits down over a cup of aromatic coffee and he switches on all the lights of his mind, what happens, the words, they flow out, and they flow out like anything, and render, and, he, through his writing, lends, his experiences upon to, his readers, and they, really understand, how things happen. I mean, you have seen apple, I have seen apple, but when you put an apple on table, for example, how it stands and how it, is placed, and all different, effects which are very much bound with it, with its positioning. Probably you overlook, probably I overlook. But a descriptive writer, for example, he has to give special attention actually to the smallest details, involved in. For example, the apple has two leaves still attached to the stem. It doesn't stand straight when resting on a tabletop. Apple does not stand straight when resting on a tabletop. Now, this is observation thing. On its left side, a streak of yellow shines underneath the red. A small bruise hangs just below the apple's crown on its backside. If this apple which I'm talking about was present in a basket along with other 6-7 apples, I'm sure that, you should be able to pick this very one, out from that basket. The next, important point of description is using all 5 senses. Like a sentence for you, he slowly closed his teeth on the ripe, the same one, and we counted in this example, if you remember, 3 senses were there. But I'm going to give you one more, small paragraph, and see how many senses are present, in this paragraph. He walked into the classroom and crossed to his desk. The floor was worn where years of boys had kicked and scuffed in their rush to escape. A damp, sickly, sweet aroma. Now look here, sweet is the taste. Previously it was all visual, sense of seeing, and sweet is sense of taste. Aroma arose from the pile of jackets. Now, aroma is what? Sense of smell. From the pile of jackets, crushed in one corner, and a blind tape taped against the window where a stone or ball had cracked the glass. Now, cracking is sense of sound. Mr. Jones rubbed his hands across the smooth polished, now this is sense of touch now, smooth polished top, and examined his fingertips for dust. Now, in this paragraph, all the 5 senses we found present. The last thing is, use strong verbs. Like I was continuously talking about colorful adjectives, colorful adverbs, and strong verbs. Strong verbs, for example, the sunlight was on the propane tank, and was is actually a conditioned verb. It's not a strong verb. Let's replace this conditioned verb by a strong action verb, and it will be the sunlight stretched over the propane tank. The sunlight was on the tank, or stretched over the tank is the, switching from ordinary verb to powerful word. Some more examples for you. The fiddles boiled the air with their music. The lilacs sliced the sky into purple. Her husband's snores sawed her sleep in half. Now look here, you can say like, her husband's, snoring disturbed her sleep, but we are not using word disturb, actually we are using saw, cut into half. Her husband's snores sawed her sleep in half. I exploded when I saw her. I'm not using the word I was surprised to see her. I was amazed to see her. I'm saying I exploded when I saw her. My blood buzzed like an honest nest. And one more piece, which probably I tried long before in some class. See like, how descriptive the writer is when he talks about, the birth of a child, for example. Like on an evening in the later part of November 1971, I was oozed out from within the womb of eternal world. Now, I was oozed out. Writer is not saying that, I was born. Rather, he is using, I was oozed out from within the womb of this eternal world to this transitory one, which no doubt flickered smile on everybody's dry leaf face. Look at the simile. On everybody's dry leaf face, which was destined to be momentarily blended with the sheer contrast of life and death. Life to me and to my mom, death. Now, take a look of this paragraph and see like in how descriptive. You feel as if like, you were also part of that group, maybe in some hospital or maybe at some place, and you were very much like feeling, the writer's, experience. Oozing out and dry leaf faces, flickering smile, transitory and momentarily. Look at the words actually, like, how nicely they paint, pictures for you. On your screen, you can take a look. I have written two sentences marked as A and B, and then with other bullets. These are actually pairs which we are going to compare. Like the first sentence, Mary had blonde shoulder-length hair and blue eyes. She wore a golden chain and a tight blue dress. She had blue leather shoes and carried a briefcase. This is sort of an attempt to describe, but it's not that compact. Changing the same description into more compact by using some powerful words would be, Mary was smart and efficient in a stylish way. The second example for you, with some sort of the same descriptions of people, that goes, Mary's eyes widened and sparkled as she read the news. Her mouth slowly turned upwards. This line is little better, but still we can use more powerful words, to make it rather more descriptive. It goes this way, Mary's eyes darted from side to side. Now look at this. Look at the powerful, word, powerful verb actually, darted from side to side. She moistened her lips and swallowed hard. When we say her, face turned up, actually, the phenomena inside was she moistened her lips and swallowed hard. Another example, Paul was tall and slim and walked effortlessly across the room. Changing the same sentence by using some more powerful words would be, Paul was lanky. Now, tall we changed into lanky, and slim we changed into skinny. Because slim can be a word with the double meanings, beauty, and, slim can also show ugliness as well. So the word should be appropriate, describing exactly the same meanings, which the object, was holding the, features. Paul was lanky and skinny and strode ungainly across the room. So this is how, I tried with some examples, to show you some, aspects of descriptive writing. It requires lots of practice. Of course, every writing style requires lots of practice. But here, I would say an inch more. Hard work, an inch more practice, you really need. With this, let's now move towards our next topic, which is persuasive writing. Before I, go into its details, I have brought for you two very small pieces. Two small persuasive writings by children, not, written by sophisticated or trained, writers. Two small, children, they produce these two writings and see the persuasive element, in them. The first piece in my hand, it's a small poem written by an African child. It came onto the scene in 2005 and it received, an acclaim all over the world. He tried to compare, compare the white and the black, discrimination, which people, make. Let's take a look what feelings he wants to convey and see how persuasive, rather you decide how much persuasive or not persuasive, he is. This goes, I would like your attention when I read it for you. He says, when I born, I black. When I grow up, I black. When I go in sun, I black. When I scared, I black. When I sick, I black. And when I die, I still black. And you white fella, when you born, you pink. When you grow up, you white. When you go in sun, you red. When you cold, you blue. When you scared, you yellow. When you sick, you green. And when you die, you gray. And you calling me colored? Now, look at the persuasive element, in his writing. We don't find any, unlike, descriptive writing, any colorful words. Very ordinary words. And he talks about, we are black and you call us black, whereas we are black from day one to the day last. And you white, you are not white, you are colored. In every activity you are colored. You change your colors, all right? So, and still you call me colored. The second writing, the name of this writing is also very interesting. The child named it Story of a Failure. You would feel amount of creativity and innovation, this child has feeded in this small piece of writing. Let's, take a look. Don't forget its title, Story of a Failure. And, of course, the message he tries, to give through this story, which he named as Story of a Failure. Take a look. Mother died at the age of 18. Lost job, 32. Now, when I say 32 and numbers, when I speak, these are ages actually. Mother died at the age of 18. Lost job, 32. Defeated for legislature, 32. Failed in business, 33. Elected to legislature, 34. Sweetheart died, 35. Suffered nervous breakdown, 36. Marriage proposal rejected, 37. Defeated for Speaker of the House, 38. Married again, 42. Defeated for nomination to Congress, 43. Elected to Congress, 46. Lost renomination, 48. Rejected for land officer, 49. Son died, 50. Defeated for Senate, 54. Defeated for nomination for Vice President, 56. Defeated for Senate again, 58. But in 1860, at the age of 59, Abraham Lincoln was elected President of the United States. Now, see, is it a story of a failure or a story of actually success? This is all about persuasive writing. People choose different organizations. People choose different styles to persuade. And that is what actually Aristotle defined persuasion or persuasive writing. What he says, the art of persuasion is the art of finding the best available means of moving a specific audience in a specific situation to a specific decision. Now, in this definition, let's analyze the keywords. The keywords, the art of finding the best available means, number one. Number two, specific audience. Not every audience. Your available means for audience, of course, will differ. The means which you adopt to choose ABC audience may not be needed to move or persuade XYZ audience. So specific audience in specific situation. Situations are unique. When situations are unique, then your means of persuading people in those situations should also be unique. This art of persuasion has a name, and Aristotle called it rhetoric. Dear student, what is rhetoric? Rhetoric is actually the means to write or speak effectively and meaningfully. So what Aristotle actually defined rhetoric, he said, rhetoric is the art of finding the best available means of persuading a specific audience in a specific situation. There are 4 tactics of rhetoric. These are difficult words. I'm going to pronounce it for you, understand them. Number 1, ethos. This is tactic number 1. Number 2, pathos. This is tactic number 2. And number 3 is logos. Now, these 3, and they make one triangle also. Ethos, you can relate this word with the ethics, for example. Ethos, E for ethos, E for ethics. And exactly the same is the definition of ethos. Then is, pathos. Now, pathos actually means emotions, feelings, belief, for example, faiths. And number 3, logos. Now, logos means actually logic and reasoning. So you can understand it, by L for logic and L for logos. And this is how the triangle is there. Like on your screen, you can take a look. The triangle, which is inverted triangle. Left hand, I have written writer. Right hand is audience. And downstairs is, subject. Ethos, I wrote with the writer. It means what? It means ethics. When I am a writer and I am writing to persuade you, for example, the very first important thing is, my ethical, my moral background and manners and all, stuff which I, need to exhibit during, this piece of activity. And pathos, which actually is the emotion, for example, feelings or beliefs of my readers or audience, you can say. And subject. And logos, I have written, with the subject. Means, whatever subject I am going to deal with, I have to deal with all logic and pragmatics. Now, this triangle, and if you compare this triangle with the triangle of leadership, for example, that's also inverted triangle, and there is leader again at the place of writer. Audience is at, which we call as followers in the leadership triangle. They are at the place of audience. And then subject. And in leadership triangle, we have a situation. And here, subject. Subject is also like a situation, very, very carefully you treat the situation or the subject. And accordingly, of course, you can change your, listeners or your readers to your followers. So this is how, it works. Let's move towards another point. How do we get others to accept our point of view? The same thing, which I discussed with you, ethos, pathos, and logos. The same 3 important elements, I'm going to reword. Like the first one, as I said, ethos, I have reworded it this way, appealing to a good character. If you want to persuade somebody, you have to exhibit a very good character. You have to, exhibit your goodwill. You have to show your background, because that's very important. We have studied, that people say that do not see who says it, just see what he says it. But in persuasion, for example, we also see who says it. I hope you remember, like when Allah Almighty asked Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam to go and deliver God's first message and invite them towards Islam. Now, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't go and started talking about, okay, God is one and I'm His messenger and this is what I want to tell you. Of course not. He talked about ethos. What? he asked them, do you know who am I? Everybody sitting in front of Prophet Muhammad said, yes, we know, you are Muhammad, son of Abdullah. And then Prophet Muhammad asked him, do you know, like, all my dealings with you? And answer was, oh yes, you are Sadiq and you are Ameen. Prophet then asked, okay, if you believe in me so much, then if I tell you that behind this mountain there is your enemy, raging and howling and waiting to crush you down their feet, how would you, like, react? They would say, of course, we'll believe in your words. And then Prophet said, okay, fine, if you go yourself behind the mountain and see whether enemy is there or not, and you find no enemy, then how would you react? They said, well, we'll doubt our eyes, not your words. Prophet said, if you believe in me so much, then why don't you believe in these words also, that God has sent me to you to deliver this message, that God is one and I'm his messenger, and the rest of the matters, of course, Look, the strategy which Prophet Muhammad followed. He didn't go and aggressively, start talking about the God's message. Very assertively, putting his background in front, asking them rhetorical questions, and then waiting for their answers, of course, which were very favorable answers. This is what ethos is. That to persuade, the primary thing is your ethical background. How strong you are ethically, how reasonable you are, how authoritative you are, and how good you feel about your people. If answers are yes, 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 of course, the first qualification, you have fulfilled. The second important thing to keep in mind when you go to persuade, and I have reworded pathos, appealing to emotion. Appealing to emotion, of course, people's emotions. Everybody has biases, everybody has emotions, everybody has likes and dislikes, Everybody has his faith. It's the writer's job, the persuasive writer's job, to appeal to these emotions. And then, of course, you can persuade, guys. Look, Dr. Stephen R. Covey, in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, in that book, he talked about the shift of a paradigm. Means changing, points of views, changing people's opinions. This is what actually we call shift of the paradigm. He, they narrated a story that it was a 5 o'clock, train moving towards, taking people towards their destinations, The train, stops at some station. There, a family, a man along with 3 children, they get into the train. The train moves. The man, sitting in his, of course, seat, and the 3 children, after 5-6 minutes, they stand up and they start, running in that compartment. Start playing, start pushing, start pulling, start, monkeying with, people's, of course, objects and their, baggage and luggage and all. People, of course, wait for some time till, end of their patience. And one of them, stands up and says, excuse me, why don't you take control of, your children? Look what they're doing with us. We are already sick and tired, Why don't you take hold of them? The man, he, as if, came out of his sleep, which was probably sleep as if, he was in years. He said, excuse me, what you said? He said, look what your children are doing, and you are so numb. Go and take control of them. He said, excuse me, I don't know what they're doing. Sorry. And, he then brings them back, and then, tells them, excuse me, actually, these children, I'm their uncle, and I'm taking these children, back to their family. Actually, their mother died, this morning, and I don't know, how to tell these children that where I'm taking them to, and what has happened to them, to their life. the most important person in their life is no more. I don't know how to tell them. And you are talking about, these matters at once. Everybody in that compartment who was so critical, they wanted to kill them, frankly speaking, but everybody, gave them hugs, gave them kisses, took hold of them in their laps, This is how the paradigm shifts. This is how you can address, you can appeal to people's emotions, and of course you can persuade them. So the first important thing for persuasive writing is writers' own ethical and moral background. Number 2, writers struggle to appeal to people's emotions. And number 3, which I reworded, the logos I reworded as appealing to reason. Now look here, in 1972, roughly 13th of October 1972, there was a rugby team, they had chartered a plane, and a team of Uruguay or something, they crashed into Andes Mountains, snow-capped mountains, the plane, crashed into. And half of the passengers, they died in the very first, contact. The half, which survived, half of them, they had their arms and legs, broken. And they also died, half of the half also died, in the first week or so. What happens, of course, about 20-25 guys, who survived, then finally, they, were, of course, waiting for help to come. For 2 weeks, they waited, and they ate whatever was left in the plane. They, of course, drank whatever was available in the plane. After 2, weeks, what happens? Food was gone. All eatables, all, drinkable were gone. And on radio, they also, heard that, they have also abandoned their search. So these 25 people, they survived for several, weeks. How they survived? They survived through cannibalism. I mean, by eating the flesh of the dead bodies. Now look here, what I'm trying to tell you through this story, that in this moment of crisis, where probably nobody would ever listen to, of course nobody, there must have been an emergence of person who stood up, and of course that was actually a student doctor who persuaded them. It's not an easy thing. I mean, you have your friend, his dead body lying next to you, and somebody comes and asks you, if you want to survive, you'll have to cut his or her body and take a chew. It's not an easy thing. This is what actually we say appealing to reason. When you present before people the realism, look, they've gone, and if you want to survive, you have to survive, and this is the method of survival. The facts and figures people share with you, the reason they share with you, idealism no more, emotionalism no more. That person, who emerged as a leader, he persuaded people, go for this eating, and then he set up, some rescue, team, and he sent, those teams to search, some, and find some help, and finally, of course, they were rescued, by the rescuers. From this, we understand from these 3 points that, first of all, the writer, he has to have his goodwill amongst the people he wants to persuade. He has to have his ethical and moral background. And number 2, he has to give due attention, towards readers' beliefs, emotions, likes and dislikes, their biases. And number 3, he should not share fiction with them. He should share no idealism with them. He should share realism with them. He should share facts and figures with them. He should share logic and pragmatics. His approach should not be aggressive. His approach has to be assertive. And this is how, he can, of course, attempt to persuade people, attempt to change their points of views, change their opinions. Now, if you want to, for example, write persuasive messages, for example, then I have prepared a guideline for you. There are 4 important points, which you should introduce into your writing. And then, of course, your writing can also be persuasive. And we call it for rhetorical devices, which persuasive writers, use and, add, of course, persuasive touch to their writing. The first principle of, or the first device is parallel structures. Introduce parallel structure into your writing, and of course, there will be one device added to your writing. An example of, parallel structure, if I give you, like Churchill's speech to the House of Commons, 4th of June 1940. Now, in this piece, which I'm going to read for you, just see the parallel. If you remember, parallel structures are, like, if you start your sentence, with the noun, then every next sentence should be with the noun, with the subject pronoun, then every sentence with the subject pronoun. If it's, condition verb, then every condition verb. If it's an action verb, then every action verb. So that's the pattern of, parallel structures. Take a look of, this piece. We will work hard, we will work smart, we will create a better future for the company and for ourselves. Now, there are three clauses in this sentence. We will work, we will create. All the three sentences, they are in parallel structure. One more example of parallel structure. This is also Churchill's speech to the House of Commons, 4th of June 1940. And the speech goes, we shall not flag or fail. We shall go on to the end. We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the streets and in the fields. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender. Every sentence is parallel, starting with we as pronoun subject, going to, of course, the, what you call helping verb, shall, and this is how the parallelism, like, people introduce to this. This is device number one to change your ordinary writing into persuasive one. Device number two is persuasive writers, they introduce triads also in their writing. Now, what is triad? Triad actually is a very intelligent use of three words together. For example, Martin Luther King's, famous line, I have a dream. Now, in this I have a dream, it's a wonderful triad. I, word number one, have, word number two, a dream, number three. So, it's a combination of three words, we call it, triad. Example for you of excellent triad, when we let freedom ring. Now, look at this sentence, let freedom ring. When we let freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we'll be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. Now, this is an excellent example of triad. Introduce parallelism. Number two, introduce triad in your writing. Third one is antithesis. Antithesis means, in expository writing we talked about, antithesis means, the other side of the coin. If you show your, readers, they find an excellent, comparison, and of course they can decide themselves, what actually is desired. In antithesis, an excellent example is the state of New Hampshire. Its motto, live free or die. Antithesis, free and die. Die is an antithesis of free. And another example of antithesis, like President Kennedy's inaugural address in January 1961. Take a look. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Antithesis. Not country do for you, ask what you can do for your country. This is what actually an example of antithesis in your writing. And the last device, which we can use to, change our writing into persuasive one, and that is rhetorical questions. Rhetorical questions, actually, we use in our writing or in our speaking, to engage, involve our readers or listeners. But of course, make sure that if you're a speaker and using, rhetorical questions, do not wait for your answers, actually. An example for you is, gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there's no peace. The war has actually begun. The next gale that sweeps from the north will bring to our ears the clash of resounding arms. Our brethren are already in the field. Why stand we here idle? Is life so dear, or peace so sweet, as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. In this piece, you can see rhetorical questions. Like, one question was, why stand we here idle? Now, he's not asking you this question that, you stand up and give reasons. Of course not. And is life so dear, or peace so sweet? These are three rhetorical questions in which he tried. And of course, if you remember when we talked about, sentence purposes, and I, of course, told you that, there are 4 sentence purpose, and there is one, interrogative. And there are, I advised you, try to use all the 4, sentence types in your sentence purposes in your writing, so that you could really have variety in it, Have declarative, have imperative, have exclamative, and have, of course, interrogative also. And these interrogatives are actually rhetorical questions. We are not going to wait for the answers, to come. This is just to, provoke, seduce, actually, our readers or listeners, for the actions, which you actually want from them. This is how, all about this persuasive writing is. And last, an analogy I would like to share with you, the same analogy which is Forrest Gump, analogy, when he talks about, how to, mold a candle. Molding a candle, of course, if you want to mold a candle, you need to melt it first. Exactly the same way, when we want to mold people's opinions, we need to melt them. Melting people requires knowing them, first of all, knowing their demographics, knowing them, from the psychographics, for example. Knowing, what exactly they are, their education, their background, their religion, their faith, their belief, their associations, their, affiliations, all that, stuff you have to keep in mind. And then, most importantly, and that's the biggest noise, actually, in you can say a stumbling block in the way of, persuading others, that is, internal biases. This internal bias actually is a resistance. You have to know the resistance level of your readers. Once you know it, then of course you can decide what device to use, what tactic to use, to persuade this person. So this is how, you can mold a person by melting his resistance, and then of course you can harden, you can ignite. So this is how, we persuade. Have a practice, start writing messages and try to use these 4 devices which I shared with you. Try to introduce parallel structures, use triads also. Go for rhetorical questions and see, your ordinary writings, they, of course, do not become exactly the way persuasives are, but, of course, you can attempt to, write or produce persuasive, pieces. This is all about, this persuasive writing and, of course, descriptive also. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time with a new topic. Take care of yourself and each other. Bye-bye.